Tune in to the Diva Hustle Show.
Hey, you guys, thanks for tuning in. Today, our guest is Michael. He's the CEO of Men of Action Mentoring. How are you doing, Michael?
Yeah, I'm really excited. I made it to Los Angeles. And you guys know if you've ever flown into this place, getting anywhere around here is kind of a nightmare. So I made it.
Yeah. I normally fly into San Francisco.
It might be faster to fly into San Francisco and drive to Los Angeles than it is to fly into Los Angeles. Yeah, I might start doing that.
So tell me a little bit about Men of Action Mentor. What is that about?
So it probably, I mean, maybe 25 years ago, I'm in college. Later on, I ended up like managing a nightclub, and I just noticed there was this massive difference in the way wealthy people acted, in like how they made their wealth and the connection they had, and then also when guys were doing really well with women and guys were doing really poor with women.
Mm-hmm.
You remember around this, the early 2000s, around that time, there started to be these forums online where guys were talking about how good they were with women and like sharing their experiences. And I got to meet a lot of these guys and find out that almost all of them were full of shit. So it was a really interesting, and the same thing happened later on. You start seeing the crypto bros and all these guys like trying to sell courses that were scams. A lot of them were scams. Like they had no bearing in reality whatsoever. And so one of these things that happened was, all after years of studying, being in the U.S. military and being able to study, good leadership and bad leadership, working in a nightclub and seeing people who were completely unaccountable and people who were very accountable. Also seeing, like, I remember having a crush on like the prettiest girl at this club. Like I'm 21 years old. And then remember this, I'll never forget this. One girl named Joy.
Okay.
It was a gentleman's club I was working at. I was a DJ. She'd sit on my lap, and she was one of the most beautiful women I've ever seen in my life. She'd sit on my lap, and she would complain all day about the other DJ named Ryan. She fucking hated this guy. She was like, this guy was horrible to me. I can't stand him. She's sitting on my lap. She's like rubbing my shoulder. She's like, Michael, I love you because you're like so good to me. You're so nice. I'm okay, cool. Thank you.
Right.
A week later, we don't see Joy anymore. A week after that, you know what Joy tells us? She left her husband and now lives with Ryan, the
Wow.
fucking DJ that she was complaining about. Exactly right. Yeah. And it was like, wait, hold on. Stop. Something that I've been taught throughout my entire life is
Okay.
not right.
Right.
Something is wrong here. There's an extra component. And what I found, and I'll skip ahead, spoiler alert, like 25 years. The thing that I found is that when men and women describe what they're attracted to, because men, what they're attracted to is more visual, it's easier for them to describe, and it's actually more accurate. If you talk to a girl, if you talk to a guy and he's like, I like Asian women with green eyes, and you go look through his internet searches, you know what you're going to find? Asian women with green eyes. They tend to like what they say they like. Women often, though, will say, I like a man to buy me flowers. But what they mean is they want a man they're attracted to buy them flowers. If a homeless person bought them flowers, they're not going to be attracted to him.
Right.
And when they say, I want a man to be more vulnerable, which makes sense, again, like, which I think you have to earn that vulnerability. What they mean is they want a man they're attracted to be more vulnerable. They don't want some strength. Some guy comes up to them at a bar, just imagine you're in a singles bar, and a guy comes up to you and is like, I've just been really having a rough day, and I'm just like, I really need someone to talk to about it. You'd be like, what the fuck is this? Like, why? I don't even know you, dude. Like, it's so weird. Because what women don't want is for men to be more vulnerable or to buy them flowers. They want the men they want.
Right.
The men they're already attracted to. Now, here's the rub. For men, when we see a woman we're physically attracted to, it's just a switch that goes on. We have perfect information. We look and it's like, well, she's physically attractive. And we could find out later she's crazy. It doesn't mean we're going to marry her, but we can see a girl and then just think she's physically attractive. For women, sometimes they can too, but a lot of times they're like, you have imperfect information. You don't know this guy could be crazy. He could be terrible in bed. He could be like, you have 4 cats. He's allergic to cats, all kinds of people who don't like cats, by the way. I don't even deal with them. And so you have all these issues, right? And so you don't know all this imperfect information. And so she has to be a little bit more discerning. She has to be a little bit more judgmental. And that's often like, while you find some of these guys who understood their way around women, a lot of, like for me, I would have a ton of female friends. One of the things that happened to me just kind of on accident is when I worked at this gentleman's club, some of the girls would be like, hey, it's Sarah's birthday party. We're all going to go out. And they liked me because I never hit on them. And I was always like super nice to all the girls. I was just like the nice guy. And they would invite me out. So it would be me and 10 girls. And we'd go out to a bar in Austin, Texas in like 2002.
Okay.
And you can imagine, like, what I expected to happen was I got to pay cover to get into this bar. I got to, we got to pay for all these drinks. And of course, Paris, I'm sure you've probably figured out what happens. One
Right.
guy walks out with 10 girls to a bar. He doesn't pay for shit. He doesn't
Right.
have to pay to get in anywhere. And in fact, the part that I really didn't expect was that other women started coming up and talking to me and asking me who I was, because they were trying to figure out who this guy was with 10 girls.
Right.
And it was this like small phenomenon. And I wasn't dating any of these girls at the time.
Wow.
I'm 22, 23 years old. I don't know anything about anything. I'm broke. I'm about 40 pounds lighter than I am right now. I don't look the same. I'm just trying to just blindly grope my way through life.
Right.
And I find out about this concept later on that I learned called make choice copying or pre-selection, which
Okay.
is, and this generally affects women, not men so much, which is when women see a man who's been chosen by other women, she tends to find him more attractive. And it's funny how many women will deny that this is a thing, but it absolutely is a thing. Because again, Paris, you can't tell if I'm crazy. You can't tell. And the biggest difference is this: if you're crazy, I'm still bigger than you. Like if you and me go on a date and you're crazy, like you could still, maybe you have a Glock or something, but for the most part, I'm bigger than you.
Right.
But if I'm crazy, I'm bigger than you. And so you have more to lose if I'm and ancestrally consider a woman being with a strange man she doesn't know, and he's twice as strong as she is in her, like men on average about twice as strong in their upper body and 50% stronger in their lower body. That's dangerous. That's really dangerous. So you have to choose. You want to choose between a group of men that you find physically attractive and other women have selected. So if you see a guy and he's surrounded by 10 women, this guy's probably not a stalker, right?
Right.
He probably doesn't smell bad. He's
Mm-hmm.
probably not physically abusive. He's
Mm-hmm.
probably, like the things that you would be worried about for a man, he's probably none of those things. If 10 women want to hang out with him,
Right.
that's probably the thing. And so that was something I had to learn, like 20 years ago. And then eventually once I started reading studies on this, there's been several evolutionary psychologists that have been studying on this. You start to find is like, oh, wait, everything we've been taught for the last 20 years about men and women just being this opposition to one another. I remember this one video of Steve Harvey saying men and women can't be friends. And I'm like, no, Steve, you can't be friends with women. I totally agree with that. You can't be friends with women. But it's like the guys that I knew that were the best with women were like comfortable. They love being around women. But one of my favorite, it's a fictional character, but one of my favorite examples of this is David Duchovny playing Hank Moody in the show Californication. There's this one line in the movie where he goes, I fall in love with every woman I meet. I think they're all incredible. I just love being around women. And because of that, they were also attracted to him because he was so incredibly not judgmental. And I just think that there's something about that has been lost recently, maybe in the last decade, where men and women, it's become very popular on YouTube. The way to grow on YouTube very quickly is to have the man fighting the woman on your podcast, and they're going at each other. And the man saying, what value do you bring other than giving him a baby? And he's like, men are not stepping up, and they're just going back at each and forth at each other. And then you see the thumbnail and they're all like yelling at each other like this. And everyone's like, oh, click. Yeah. And in Paris, here's another problem is that so I'm a content creator, I've got about 180,000 subs on YouTube. And so we test different thumbnails. Wow. And we test different cover photos and we test different titles. And so I have a background in astrophysics. I love talking about physics, and I love talking, and I'm a former US military officer. I love talking about military engagements and geopolitics. And when I talk about those things, Paris, no one gives a shit. No one cares. But when I talk about this one time, I'll tell you another story. It's the first time I've ever told a story, Paris. I had the biggest crush on this girl in 2007 named Sydney. She was gorgeous. Models. She lived in Atlanta, Georgia. Back then, there was this club called Fever that we would all go to in Atlanta. It was only open for 1 year before it got shut down because it was just too crazy. They had huge parties. I remember Kim Kardashian was down there one time. I remember seeing what's her name? Carmen Electra was there one time. That's the first time I met Carmen Electra. I mean, these were wild. And there was a basement. It was an old mansion, and there was a basement in the bottom where the party was going on, and it was wild. Anyway, I had the biggest crush on this girl named Sydney. And one time, Sydney, I believe that she got drugged. I found out later she took the drugs herself. She took a cap of GHB. She ends up pooping on herself in the club. I end up saving her like this fucking white knight, taking her out to an ambulance, going with her to the hospital, which I don't regret any of that. I would have done that anyway. But it's like, I'm there. I stay up all night, whatever. She wakes up. She's got a catheter in her. And she's like, oh my God, Michael, thank you so much. for being here. And I was like, oh man, this is the most incredible woman ever. And then I text her later because I'm so like attracted to her. I text her later. I'm stationed at Robbins Air Force Base, so I'm like an hour away. And I text her later. I was like, hey, I want to see you this weekend. And she goes, yeah, maybe we'll hang out, whatever, And I'm like, and by the way, I know she finds me physically attractive, and I just rescued her, possibly saved her life,
right?
Possibly saved her life, right? And so the next week comes, and I go back to Fever, and I can't find Sydney. I know she's there. She told me she'd be there, and I can't find Sydney anywhere. And I end up going over to hanging out with my buddy like a couple of days later. He's a club promoter, and he goes, "Oh yeah, Sydney. I had sex with her up in one of the rooms upstairs at Fever at the club."
Wow.
Again, Paris, something's wrong here.
Right.
No one teaches you this. And I know there's going to be people listening to this. Well, that's just the girl you chose. Listen, if you guys think when you're 22 years old, you know any different, you're a fucking fool, first off. But second of all, it's like women will go through these phases where they just kind of like the bad boy and then complain about him later. And then later on, they're like, okay, I learned a lesson from this. Some women don't learn a lesson. And a lot of guys don't learn a lesson also. Like I think Jeff Bezos and the new woman he's with now, I think he clearly hasn't learned a lesson. He's about to lose another half of his money. But it's one of these situations where it was like, okay, the world didn't tell me what to do in this situation. No one gave me good advice for this. A lot of times I had to learn on my own. And a lot of times it was some of my female friends who were very open. I have some female friends going back. I have this one female friend. She's a huge real estate agent here, and she's a former Playmate. And she would date billionaires and rock and movie stars and rock stars. And she told me about these horribly like toxic battles that she would go back. Oh, I don't text him, or he doesn't text me, or I would take a picture with another guy to make him jealous. And she was super honest with me about it. And it was the first time like I could show her text messages between me and a girl and be like, yeah, that girl's with some other dude right now. Just don't even call her again. And I would listen to her, and this girl was like super toxic. But here's the problem, Paris. If the girl who's toxic keeps giving me advice and it keeps working, what does that tell you?
Right. That there's some truth to it.
Yeah, there's some truth to it. She kept giving me advice, and it kept being right over and over and over again. And then the other thing is like, then I would meet guys like I'm good friends with Dan Bilzerian. And so Dan and I would have conversations. This is years later. Dan and I have been friends for about the last 10 years. Okay. And I would have conversations with Dan, and we came to so many of the same conclusions, totally independent one another. But the problem is this: if what you hear Dan say you feel is toxic, then if I do it, it shouldn't work. But if I do it and it works, then what does that tell you? That tells you something about your observation of the world is incorrect, right? And so that was something that it just took me a while to figure out, that the world isn't fair. Social media is fake. Status isn't real. Status is only perceived. And when I came to these whole thing, when I came to understand these concepts, my life changed pretty dramatically. Like then it was women competing for my attention. I got invited to all the coolest parties. It was never an issue for me. I got job interviews. Do you know how hard it is to get a job as a portfolio manager at a fucking hedge fund? Do you know how hard that is? That is a really hard job. And I got that job, at 36 years old. When I was a military officer, it's just I was networking with the right people and got hired as a quant. That's a really hard job to get.
Yeah.
And so, but it was totally from networking. It was totally from people watching me give speeches on YouTube and on a company called Tasty Trade. That's how I got that job. So I started figuring out, okay, people who are good at networking always had more access to resources and always had more access to, mating opportunities. This is men and women. Right. And so I was like, okay, this is a really interesting concept. Let me go more into this. And then like around 2015, I get invited to the Playboy Mansion. And then I started going to like bigger and bigger parties. And then I would post about it on social media. Instagram is just like coming up. And I get these messages from people, and they're like, hey man, how did you do this? Like, are you spending a bunch of money? Like they're legitimately asking me, like, how did you make this happen? Right. And one of the things that's really difficult for people to grasp, and a lot of people will tell you that I'm lying, I don't spend any money when I go out ever. And it's when I take my friends to dinner, maybe for birthday. But the reason why, the thing you probably understand is if you're an attractive woman and you go out, a lot of times you don't have to pay for drinks. Well, if you're a guy and you take, like I took for my birthday, there's a video, it's up on my IG right now. It's me and 30 girls at my birthday party. And the guys are like, wow, you paid all these women. And it's just so confusing to me. It was like, what life are you living that you show up to a nightclub with 30 girls and you have to pay for anything? Like, I'm just so confused. Like your reality is so separated from
it's
objective
truth. Believe that than to believe the truth. Right.
Yeah. But it's just like, how could you think otherwise? If you go anywhere with 10 girls, they charge, like, dude, you go to the movies and sometimes the movie theater lets you in free. Like, it just, people like pretty girls. I go to restaurants. I've often gone to restaurants and I've been with like 6 or 7 girls that are so pretty, they don't even charge us. To be fair, this is a Vegas thing. This is definitely a Vegas thing. But it happens in Los Angeles too. Like if I were to call Tao nightclub right now and I was, or Tao, the restaurant, and I were to, because I know the owner of Tao, and I would say, hey man, is it cool if I get a comp if I bring 10 girls there for a birthday party? And they would tell me yes. It would not even be a question, especially on a Wednesday night. They would tell me yes. And so, but for other people, they're like, no, you pay these women and you pay for all this stuff. And it's like, they can't grasp this concept of networking and having a ton of really attractive female friends. And then all of a sudden you get invited to everything. There's 2 ways to get into Playboy Mansion when it was open. There's only 2 ways to get in. You were either invited by Crystal or Hugh Hefner or Crystal Hefner. You were invited by them, or you paid $1,500. Okay. Those are the only ways. And in order to get invited, the guys who got invited often were guys who brought 10, 20 girls with me. I would go to the Playboy Mansion and I would put somewhere like maybe 40 to 60 girls on the list to go. When I went to the Ignite party, by the way, the craziest parties of all time, there is no doubt there will never be any. It's not the Diddy parties, although there was no Diddy, there was no baby oil. But the most fun parties of all time were Dan Bilzerian's Ignite parties in Bel Air. There's nothing will ever compare to that. It was like 8 girls for every guy. There was nothing but like, I'm sitting here. Here's Devin Booker standing right here. Standing right here is Diplo. Next to me is Bruce Buffer. Right here is Jake Paul. Like, and I'm not saying they're passing by. We're all in the same room. This is like this is a 3-story house. Those are the craziest parties I've ever been to in my life. And I would bring 90 girls to those parties. Wow. And it was like, because that's how you got in, because there were no tickets. You couldn't buy tickets. Right. And so I was like, how can I express this to other people? So 2019, I just decided I took all of the information I'd learned for 25 years and I put it into a course. And the course is not only the women part, although that's what gets most guys to join the course. The course is also the brand building component and the components about building a business in order to scale it up. And so how do we use these same components? Like, I don't understand, guys. Beer companies have been using this for years. You remember the Michelob Ultra commercials, and they're selling sex. It's like, you drink this beer and then all of a sudden you're playing volleyball with hot blondes on the beach. Like Axe, do you remember Axe body spray? Yes. You smell the Axe, and then do that. I still talk to people, and like, that was one of the most successful campaigns in history, where the guys would spray Axe and then women would jump all over them. I don't understand, how do you think that those things are successful, and how have they been working for so long, but somehow you don't think this is real? Right. And the other thing that was really hard for me to grasp, Paris, and a lot of people don't grasp this, is that status is always just perceived. It's always just perceived. One of my favorite podcasters is actually Chris Williamson. I don't know if you know, he's from Austin. He's I believe he's originally Welsh, and he does a podcast in Austin. It's really, really popular. And Chris was on a reality TV show, I think Love Island or something like that, and then used that fame and transmuted that into a popular podcast. So reality TV is as fake as you can get. There's nothing faker than that. None of it's reality. He literally took perceived fame and converted it into something that makes him money. Wow. And so if you can take something like that, if perceived fame is fake, but you can convert it into money, then is it fake anymore? No. Is it really fake? It's real. You know what I'm saying? It's real. So that's the thing. So, but there is no other type of status other than perceived status. So a lot of times, one of the criticisms I'll get for my course is, hey man, these guys are just getting fake status. And I'm like, if you had fake status, like if you went out, if you saw a guy, Paris, and you were going to go out with a guy, and all of your female friends were like, you really should date this guy. Like, oh my God, like I know his ex, he was really good to her. Like we all would love to date him. If you got that, so basically they've perceived that he's high status. And it works on you, and you end up dating him. If you end up dating him because of the perception of his status, then was it fake?
Yeah, no, it wasn't fake.
It's real.
It's real.
That's my point. So there is no real status. It's only perceived. So therefore, all status is fake from that standpoint. And it's hard for people to grasp it. They don't want to. They want to hold on to this idea of a meritocracy. And when it comes to interpersonal communication, a meritocracy really isn't important. It really isn't that important. Some of the best speakers in the world are some of the most useless, lazy people I've ever met in my life. They really are, and they're incredible speakers. Some of the best comedians are some of the biggest degenerates I've ever met in my life. Yeah, horrible degenerates, but they're so funny, and their status is real. Their status is real because of as long as we all agree. Just like, what is the price of the S&P 500? The price of the S&P 500 is what we agree it is. Meaning, we take all the possible sellers of S&P 500 stock, and we take the one who's at the lowest, and we take all the buyers of S&P 500 stock, and we take the one at the highest. Where those two transact, where that transaction happened, is it is the agreed upon price of the S&P 500. Whenever you guys look at a stock price, understand all that is the last transacted price.
Right.
That's all it is.
That's
and
all
so what we've taken is we've taken two fields of perception and mashed them together, and we've agreed on a price. But that price is no more real than your fake status.
Right.
It's no more real.
So I wanted to ask you about like dating in the digital age. How do you feel like the dating on the platforms has changed the way people approach relationships?
So there's some great books on this, Paris. I would love if you really want to research this, research any books on evolutionary psychology. So basically the idea is the concepts of natural selection from Charles Darwin basically also apply to our brains. And Charles Darwin actually believed this, and so did Sigmund Freud, but we got away from this. The behaviorists for like 50 years, B.F. Skinner and people like that, started to believe, Paris, that if I gave you a Tonka trunk and I gave your brother a Barbie doll, that I would make your brother feminine and I would make you masculine. And we know now that that isn't true. We know that the reason why men are masculine in general has to do with their endocrine system, has to do with testosterone. And the reason why women are feminine also has to do with their endocrine system and their XY chromosome. Right. We know that now. We didn't know that before. We thought people were just blank slates and you could basically teach anyone to become a doctor. We teach anyone to become a firefighter. We could teach anyone to become a murderer if we wanted to, based on this blank slate theory. Well, we know that isn't true now. Yeah. And so we go back and look at these ancestral beliefs. And so one of the things you have to consider is, before the Pleistocene epoch, during the Pleistocene epoch, before the agricultural revolution, you and I would live in a tribe of 150 people at most. If the tribe got bigger than 150, it would split. If you look at military units right now, they're about 150 people. It's called Dunbar's numbers, an anthropologist who came up with this idea that humans were basically designed to only see 150 faces throughout their entire life.
Wow.
And this is also one of the reasons why when we encountered other tribes, we either had emissaries to go trade with the other tribe, or we would go kill them. Right. That was basically how it worked. There wasn't like a mix and mingle, thing, unless there was like a wedding. Weddings were a great way to broker peace between two tribes. But for the most part, that wasn't what happened. For the most part, you grew up in a tribe. And then when you're in that tribe, there's only 7 or 8 or 9 or as many as maybe 20 people that you could possibly breed with. That was it, for men especially. Right. Because in general, as men, you're going to breed with someone generally your age or younger. Women could date with someone much older than, but for men, it wasn't generally going to be that way. And so you as a man, because you only had 6 or 7 women to choose from, you were very happy with those 6 or 7 women. Right. And you only compared them to each other. So now take the contrapositive, which is what women had to deal with, was they had maybe 10 or 15 men that they had to choose from their whole life. And that was it. They didn't have Michael B. Jordan, Drake, and Tyga sliding into their DMs. Just consider this, right? Like you're a woman and you just been listening to Drake's music all week, man. You've been listening to his shit all week. And then Drake, dude, and I'm not saying this. And by the way, for the ladies who are watching this, it's not Drake who's messaging you from the Champagne Poppy account on Instagram. He has a handler who has his account. He just has 2-factor authentication. He has a handler who messages hundreds of girls from that account, and he tries to set up parties for Drake. That's what's going on. Same thing with Tyga. Tyga, if you guys have ever gotten a message, ladies, put a 1 in the chat. If you ever got a message from Tyga about coming to a video shoot, like Tyga apparently has 7 million videos out because every weekend he has a video shoot that he invites girls to and then tries to recruit them to come on his OnlyFans.
And that's true, because I saw one girl on TikTok and that's how Drake slid into her DMs.
Yeah. It's not actually Drake, just so you guys know. He hires someone. By the way, I like most business people, when you have like millions of followers, you're going to hire someone to do your DMs. They're literally called DM setters. But in this case, it's DM setters for him to meet women. But girls will see that and in their mind, my buddy Homath says it, women often get stuck on their highest setting. Men, not so much. A man can date a 10, and if he finds an 8 who makes him very happy, he will settle for that 8. He will. If she brings peace, and if he's had a traumatic experience with a 10 who cheated on him, took his money, he'll meet an 8 and he will settle down with that 8. He will be very happy with her. He will be very happy with her, bro. He gives her kids. He brings her peace. A man will settle. I'm not saying he won't look at other women, but I will say for the most part, he will marry a woman like that. Yeah. Women, on the other hand, often what will happen is they'll get stuck on their highest setting. And it's because of an evolutionary adaptation called hypergamy, which is in general, women want men that are bigger, stronger, wealthier than them. And this has to do with protection and provisioning for their child. It's just a logical, adaptation. So because of that, women often will get stuck on their highest setting. So because Drake messaged them, in their mind, they see a potentiality where they're dating Drake.
Right.
And so therefore, the guy who messaged them on Tinder, Bumble, and Hinge, he's so far below Drake that she's not even interested in going on a date who actually might make with a guy who might make her happy. Instead, she's trying to get to that next party.
Right.
Does that make sense? And she's
Yeah.
chasing and then she's chasing the bag. She's comparing herself to what she sees on TikTok. Remember Dunbar's number, about 150 people? Well, now she has exposure to not only millions of men, but the men at the top are giving her attention. Like, look at all the, dude, it's so crazy how many girls that I know that are fitness models that have Michael B. Jordan just like liking their posts. It's crazy. Like, how does this guy have any fucking time to work? You know, and I don't believe it's him. I believe he has a handler who does this, but it's just so maddening. But like when you come to that realization, then you're like, oh, okay, this is the reason why dating today has gotten harder. Now, not every woman is getting messages from Drake. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is there is a guy who played quarterback at, maybe at the college she went to, who she had a fling with, who messages her every once in a while. And the guy she's dating falls short physically or from an excitement level in comparison to him. So I want you to consider this. When Amazon opened up, remember there back when I was growing up, we had a lot of mom and pop shops that would sell pizza, or they would sell clothing, or they would sell diapers, or they would sell gardening supplies, or they would sell whatever. Wolf's Nursery would sell like stuff for your garden. Like we had all these different stores for different things. And we had maybe one big grocery store like Kroger, but for the most part, we had different stores. And we also had we had local mom and pop grocers. And Amazon came out and crushed that whole thing. Because it was one of these things where, like, at first I was like, oh man, Amazon's going to run these people out of business. But now it's like, I'm looking at my camera, my phone.
Tune in to the Diva Hawks Show. Motivate the glow. We give you more info. Think to my head to toe. I let the whole world know. I let the whole world know.